Hello there.
Hey, Nancy. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Al's over here making as much noise as humanly possible. You want to say
Hey,
hi?
Al. Hey. Well, thanks for agreeing to talk to me. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm totally honored. It's awesome.
Well, hopefully I can ask some really good questions about this.
Oh,
Hey.
yay.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Al, where's my sound? Where's my sound? Hold on. Where's my sound?
Okay.
I can't. Hold on. Let me just adjust some things here.
Like a sound there.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, now we're better. Okay, yeah, go ahead. All right. Yeah.
Well, it's nice to sort of meet you, actually, I guess, officially.
Yes.
Kind of.
Same.
Yeah, I've known who you were for a long time, and I even remember I even wrote on my notes here that I was going to bring up the Philadelphia Maximum Rock and Roll Scene Report that talked about the Philly BYO, and that your catchphrase was Philly BYO shreds. Is that true? Did you come up with that? Is that you?
I don't know if I came up with it, but we thought what we were doing was pretty cool.
Yeah. And then I think I read one interview where you were friends with Sean Stern, and you called. Did you guys call him up too?
Get out of here! This right now? He's taping it now. Get out of here!
I remember the BYO connection.
Al has not read my book. I should just.
I don't need to read. I lived it.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Brian. Go ahead. Yeah. Sean and I were people back then. People would say like, "Oh, you should talk to this person and you should talk to that person," and they would give you the numbers and stuff. And I forget who gave me Sean's number, but we used to talk quite a bit, and we didn't meet until long after I had moved to Boston. But he was really smart, and he gave us lots of good ideas, and so that was the connection. He was fun. He's a fun guy.
Yeah. I might be remembering this wrong, but wasn't there maybe even for a little while a third Better Youth organization that tried to start up? Because I remember the LA one, of course, because that's where I'm from. And then I read about the Philadelphia one. Do you remember if there was a third one? I feel like
I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really like your book, of course.
Thank you so much. It means a lot. It really does.
Sure. What gave you the idea about doing this in the first place, and how long did it take? How much time passed from when you decided this would be a good idea to it actually being realized and now officially is out?
Yeah, there were a couple reasons why I wrote it. Reverend Hank had asked me one time to write something about how punk rock affected my teaching. And so, I wrote the article. It came out really good. I ended up submitting it to Education Week, and it kind of went viral and was shared a lot. So I was like, oh, it's something people might be interested in. And then I used to, on the anniversary dates of shows, I would post on the hardcore pages, Old School Hardcore Kids or No Echo. And I would post, like, this is what happened, and people were always like, oh, you tell a great story, you should write a book. and so I thought that was great, but the other thing that kept happening was that, these men born in like the 90s, I would post a story and, some guy would be like, oh, well, actually, you're wrong about that. That really didn't happen. And I would, I was there, I was there.
Yeah.
And so that got to be really irritating. And so I said, let me just write the book, set the record straight. And then, what will be, will be.
Right. So you were motivated into action by moronic, much younger gatekeepers that think they know everything and weren't even born there, and that was annoying after a while.
Yeah. It definitely was a lot of mansplaining, and there's still a lot of mansplaining going on, and that's why, we created our own page called Women in the Pit just to kind of get away from it. Yeah, you have to be a woman to be on that page. And, it's very refreshing that, you can post something and you don't have some dude telling you, oh no, that's not really what happened. And that's not Irving Plaza. And,
my favorite part of that, and obviously since I'm not a woman, I don't get mansplained. I just get fact checked. And usually what ends up happening is I just get to listen to somebody basically lie to me about something that I know, because I have like a really good memory for it's called selective memory. Like I've remembered, I can remember really sort of unimportant things, but I can't remember my parents' birthdays. So,
I'm with you.
I'll remember, for instance, I remember Philly BYO shreds. And that's how long ago was that? 40 years ago?
40 years ago.
But if you ask me what my mom's birthday is, I couldn't tell you. It's like but
right.
That would be really annoying.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I had a guy, tell me yesterday that the Ramones, were not respected in the United States. He was from Argentina. And so he was like, no, no one cared about the Ramones. And I was like, well, that depends. So
I guess that depends on your viewpoint, because plenty of people cared about the Ramones.
Yeah, we really cared about the Ramones. Al was inspired by the Ramones. I love the Ramones. I saw them every time they played, but people, they want to tell you. So I figured I'll write the book, and then, that'll be out there and they can come at me.
Has anybody come at you, actually?
No, not yet, but I'm sure someone will, Who knows?
It's like, well, you have the advantage of actually knowing what you're talking about and being involved in all of it. Certainly before I was, after reading your first chapters and of the book, and the gateway is kind of similar, except you like better music at a far younger age than I would end up, like David Bowie and stuff like that. Being obsessed with David Bowie, and how that's kind of, in a weird way, David Bowie is kind of a gateway toward all these other weird things and stuff like that.
I believe that. Yes, absolutely.
Did you move? Because I bought this record when it came out, and I think from reading your book that you were probably gone from Philadelphia, but that "Get Off Our Back" compilation record, were you?
What year did it come out? Do you remember what year it came out?
Oh gosh, I want to say 1983.
Yeah, I was already in Boston by then.
Right, and I already know that Flag and Democracy was played that infamous show. I
think that came. That Philly really, those guys, they just, they did some really great things. Chuck and Allison and Ron Thatcher, they had some great vision, and they really took it far, and I had moved here, so I missed a lot of that stuff. We SSD went back and played Love Hall and stuff, and that was fun. But yeah, I had moved here, and so I missed some of that stuff. So yeah, I that compilation absolutely came out after I moved.
Okay. After I was finished reading the book, I was wondering, why does the book end with you moving to Boston?
I just thought that was a good spot to end, I don't know. It was really important for me to tell my story and not SSD's story or Al Barile's story. I wanted, and I've had people say this. I had some guy say to me, I think it was on the No Echo page, well, your only claim to fame is that, you wrote a book because you're the wife of Al Barile. And I said, well, my book ends in 1982 and I didn't marry Al till 1989. So, my book really is, it's about our love story and when we meet. But, it ends in 1982 when I moved to Boston. So I don't know, it just seemed like a good spot. And I didn't want to get, I didn't want it to go on and stuff,
Got it. Also reading the book, right away, you could tell that you valued having your own space and not a disgusting punk rock shithole to crash in, and you know, you had a pretty good job early on. You weren't working in a kitchen. It seemed like you knew the value of having your own space and living in a non-shithole environment. And that puts you also pretty far ahead of a lot of people, our contemporaries or people that came into that world during that time. Did you always kind of have your eye towards not compartmentalizing your interest in that, but knowing, well, this is one part of it, but I need to have a good job. I'm interested in, you know, education. I'm not totally 100% down with the stereotypical punk rock kind of things. Did you kind of already know that right away?
Yeah.
That you wanted to have that sort of clean living space and an eye toward the future kind of thing?
Definitely. My father was a Marine, you know, so he raised us a certain way with certain values. My mother was a brilliant woman. And although for, you know, most of the time she was a housewife, she didn't start working till we were like in high school and stuff. You know, she was very organized and you know, neat. And so, I think I just internalized that. And so it was always important for me to work and have money and support myself and not suck off anybody else and have a nice place to live. And Al was kind of the same way, you know, like the first time he came down and visited me in Philly, he like legit said, like, I'm so glad you don't live in a shithole. You know? He was like, I was a little scared coming down here that you like lived in a squat or something, you know, not that there's anything wrong with that. It just wasn't for me, you know. I needed to have you know, kind of my space and I've always been driven. And, you know, I'm sure this is because I have a father that was a Marine. I've always been driven to work. I work 3 jobs. I've always worked 3 jobs, like since I was 12, you know, like I just, you know, that's just who I am, I think, kind of.
Right. Now, after the book's over, I guess your path on becoming a teacher kind of starts at some point after that. Were you still kind of, after you moved to Boston and stuff, were you still, was there like a cutoff point?
Yeah, there was. And we know, it was very delineated too. So, you know, after I moved to Boston in 82, 83, 84, 85, still, you know, involved. SSD was still playing. And then both Al and I kind of got like, it just had reached a saturation point for us, I think. You know, the scene was changing. For me, a lot of the bands that I liked broke up. And I didn't really like the new ones coming in. I was at that point, I was like, you know, 24, 25 years old. I was, you know, aging out of it a little bit, you know? And so Al, when SSD broke up, Al sold all the equipment and we bought a jet ski, you know, and we went from being in like smoky, dark clubs to being out on, you know, in the sunshine on a lake, on a Kawasaki 550 stand-up jet ski, you know, and it was really fun, you know, and it was really refreshing and different. And then Al was a machinist at GE. And he said, I think I want to be a mechanical engineer, you know, so I'm going to go back to school. So when he said that, he said he was going to go back to school. Well, then I was like, well, then I'm going back to school too. I had like a 2 years associate's degree to be a paralegal. So I went back to school and decided, you know, I still worked, of course, you know, I went part-time, but I went back to school to be a teacher. And so we both went kind of back to school at the same time, you know, we jet ski on the weekends and, you know, I'd still see bands that I liked when they came through, you know, TSOL and, you know, Meatmen or, you know, like whoever, you know, if there was a band, I saw Biohazard, you know, like a couple of bands I remember like in 87, I really liked Guns N' Roses, I was
Right.
like really into Guns N' Roses, and I was like, had to see them. And I saw them a bunch of times. And, so there were definitely bands that I would still go and see, but I wasn't as ensconced into the scene as I was kind of, moving on and doing other things.
Yeah. It's also kind of funny because people really hate it when you talk about people from our generation just getting tired of it and moving on for whatever reason. That just bugs people. And my saturation point was kind of like 1986, I guess. I was like a tape trading letter writer, I'll draw anything for you kind of person, which was, great. And then, it's sort of the same thing. All the bands kind of that I really liked broke up, and I didn't like, I'll go on record. I've gone on record as saying I just wasn't into things like I wasn't really into most speed metal or crossover or whatever. I mean, if it was good, but like it's like anything else. There's a little bit of it that's good of any kind of music, and a lot of it's just whatever. And it seemed like people were either going speed metal or this or whatever. And there was too much other new music coming out that was sort of influenced by that stuff that I liked, that I couldn't dismiss because it wasn't punk or hardcore or whatever. So that's kind of where I went. And I also moved away from Los Angeles by 86. So I missed out on like when everybody discovered they wanted to sound like stuff like, like Bad Religion a couple of years, and nothing against any of those guys or whatever, but like there was this cutoff point, and like, after you're exposed to things like the Bad Brains, and you saw them a million times in their prime, for me, them and Black Flag were like,
with you.
And where do you go from there? It's so it just doesn't give me the same feeling. But it's not like a put down of anybody. It's just
I feel the same way. Yeah. I none of it was a put down. It just was my time to leave,
Yeah. Well, I also wrote this down. Why do you think that the time period that you talk about, why do you think it hasn't been forgotten? It's actually the complete opposite these days. It's almost like it's really documented. I mean, not like it was ever forgotten, but with the internet and stuff. Why do you think it resonates so much with people that were either there, like you were, and I was a little bit later, or young kids reading about these things in your book and the things that you did and the bands that you saw and the experiences you had? Why do you think it resonates so much with people all these years later? Because it's a long time ago. And
I mean, that was my central question of my book. Why am I still talking about hardcore 40 years later? I've moved on. I have a career. Like I've done a whole bunch of things, different afterwards, like why am I still talking about? And that's why I went down to talk to Ian, because Ian was still involved in the music business, and he was at a lot of the same shows that I was at, that I talked about in my book, and, we had a really good conversation. And I think, a lot of the reason is, number one, we made friends with people that we are still friends with today, like that was really, that was really important. Number two, it made me who I am today, like in my teaching, I draw on my punk rock, ethos all the time, like it's a really important part of who I am, and I married a guy that was, in one of the bands. So like that was, that's got a kind of a long lasting effect. But the music of that time to me was so exciting and energetic and alive and real and pure and organic, and just like, it just was like a spontaneous combustion, those 2 years from 81 to 83, where just every band was so great and so great live. And, I mean, that's my youth, that's when I, to go and see these bands and you just had the best time.
But but it's also not, because you're right. I mean, it's not just because you were young or I was young. It's because the stuff was truly amazing. I mean, it just was,
Yeah.
It was, it's like it was your entrance into the counterculture of the time. And, it was amazing stuff. So
Right.
maybe,
besides having a huge influence on me, I love that music and I still listen to it today. I still listen to the Bad Brains. I still listen to Minor Threat. I still listen to Bad Religion, TSOL, SSD, not all the bands from back then, I still love when I work out. I love Stiff Little Fingers to work out to, like that Hank's album will get you through any workout, cardio workout. Same with Bad Brains,
right.
and there, to me, there were no bands that made me feel that way. Maybe that's because I was too old. I liked Rage Against the Machine a lot. Like they sort of got me, I could feel that feeling with them, but I just, that music was great, and it was made by kids, that's incredible.
Yeah, definitely. My dilemma with these days is like, I don't really have to, I don't sit around and talk about this stuff with a lot of people, which is probably one reason why I started doing these interviews. But, every time I'm able to talk to somebody like you that has the same kind of background, it's almost like, because of that shared experience, it's almost like kind of like having an instant friend. I guess it's almost like you had the same sort of experience, like maybe not as serious as like a Vietnam veteran or something, but I don't mean to put it in that context, but it's like you have an experience that's unique to people that were there. So you already have this sort of common interest in something, which makes it easier.
It's a family, and it always was. And it's those shared interests, bring people together. And I can really see this now, like the book is getting published and, I like, when I started writing the book, maybe I had like, I don't know, 2,000 Facebook friends. And now I'm like getting close to 5,000. So, because I think there's a camaraderie in it, and there's a shared feeling that's really nice. And it doesn't matter, it's global, which is really cool. As I said, I was talking to this guy from Argentina yesterday. I've got, people from Malaysia emailing me, and that's really, asking me questions. I've done interviews with people in Belgium and Germany and the UK, and, like that's mind blowing to me, that to think that like there are people in those places reading my book.
Yeah, it's amazing. Did you have a sense of accomplishment when you got when this showed up in the box in
Yeah, it was such a great moment. So and some people had gotten the book before I did, and they were posted on social media. So I could see the hard copy of it. And I just wanted to hold it in my hand. So, the UPS guy dropped it off and I'm screaming to Al, they're here, and he's running down the stairs, the dog's barking, and we're, Al's trying to videotape the moment, but it was a tremendous, tremendous sense of accomplishment. And I was really, really unbelievably lucky to work with Ian from Bazillion Points. Like, this book would not be out if it was not for him. He really, believed in me and believed in the book. And he was an incredible editor, super professional, super trustworthy. I can't say enough, great things about that guy. I had, worked with some people before that, and it just was a disaster. It wasn't an honest experience for me. So, to have Ian, it was really incredible. And so, I'll always be grateful to that guy.
Ian Christie. Yeah,
he's fabulous.
Has this inspired maybe thoughts or ideas for another book somewhere down the line? Are you thinking about that?
It actually kind of maybe did, I don't know, kind of did the opposite, maybe, I don't know. Like, so we have the SSD book coming out, Al and I.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Al and I and Phil and Flash are doing an SSD photo essay book that'll probably be out in the fall. And it's basically, just stories told by the people that were there, with a lot of Phil's pictures and flyers and stuff like that. And so that's being done by Radio Raheem. And so, that'll come out hopefully in the fall. And then, I had written a teacher book, and I thought, a couple of things, but what I really want to do is write a screenplay. So one of my students, a young man named Elijah, gave me this book called Dying of Whiteness. And, it talked about how the gun industry, they play to white men's fears, fears about people of color, fears about gender, fears about their own masculinity, and all these men are buying guns. And what's happening is, white men make up 40% of the population, but 80% of gun suicides. And so white men are dying by their own hand and their own firearms, on a daily basis. And I'm like, I was reading this, and it was just, the statistics were, you're more likely to, you're more likely to die by your own hand than to have somebody shoot you,
Right.
And gun violence is actually down. It doesn't seem that way, but it is. It's actually, down from the years when we grew up. And so I was like, wow, this is so powerful. And then there was a lot of other stuff in the book too about how, white people especially, vote against their own self-interest, so you have healthcare for everybody, and you have a lot of white people that are really sick with chronic illnesses, diabetes, hepatitis, like all these things. And if we, the healthcare system was the way it should be, these people would be getting the care that they needed. And you can see it almost happening state. If you live in one state, you can get care. If you live in another state, you can't, because they voted against it. But yet people won't vote for those, they won't vote in their own interest. And so I was like, wow, that's really crazy. And then it talked about a state where, they did all these austerity measures in a good economy for schools, and they cut back money for schools unbelievably. And what happened was the schools in that state, they of course went downhill, because when you don't fund education, it has a wide, a ripple effect. And so now companies don't want to come there, and they don't want to build, bring their corporations to those states, because there's not a workforce that's educated. And so it was all these things, and my mind was like so blown. And so I was like, how can I get this message out there? And I was like, well, what if I made a movie? So, I'm Tommy Wiseau, like I'm making a movie. So I thought, what, I'm gonna just, in the summer, I only work one job now. I'm down to one job in the summer, part-time. And so I thought, I'm going to try and do this and see what happens. So
awesome. Well, I wish you luck on that. One of the great lessons I learned, just listening to you talk about being excited about doing something, was it was always a backdrop for me being excited to do my own thing, to try to be creative and just stay busy doing stuff. And it was almost like that. It was a soundtrack for that. So that was one of the things I took away from all that stuff, for sure, was just the excitement of doing something and planning on doing something. Was I don't know what I'm trying to say.
I get it. I mean, I'm old, AF, and like, I don't know if I even have the energy to do it, but like, I thought it would be fun just to, try.
Well, you should do it. Well, I'll ask you a few more questions, and I'll let you go.
Okay.
So thank you very much again. I'm going to try to work on your husband, because I really want to talk to him, because he's a really interesting person, as I guess you obviously must know. The stature of what he did 40 years ago, it's kind of like similar to the question I asked, like, why are people still interested in these things that we experienced? And, like, Al's in a unique position where he did this one thing, even though he was in two bands, that still to this day, for some people, it has this huge presence, and it was good. But from talking to him, he's actually the complete opposite of the sort of person I thought he might be. He's like, everything about him it's just a little different.
Yeah.
In a very commendable way. What is the big misconception of being married to your husband for so long that you hear back constantly, probably online and not really in person, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot. I hear a lot because I run the Instagram. I created the SSD Control Instagram at a time when Al was really down, about his health issues and stuff. And I wanted him to see, like, you had an impact. And so to make it authentic, I would only post stories that either came from the band or were people talking about the band, And so, just recently, a guy on Facebook was like, they were all stupid jocks, And so I think there's this perception of Al because he played hockey, and there's this perception that like everybody in Boston played hockey. I only know 3 of the hardcore people that played a lot of hockey. I would say maybe some played when they were little, but that was Al and Pat and Richie from Negative Effects, and so people think Al, they think, he's just a dumb jock, but Al is a brilliant man. Like, I mean, you probably know that if you talk to him,
Yeah, I feel like right away I was able to see a really honorable, different sort of person, and just his stories about his main focus was protecting their gear at all costs. More so than getting drunk or
that was
getting scene points or being in the right place at the right time. And it's like, that's a very organized person for back in the
he was 80s. Al is definitely on the spectrum. And so he is, he gets very single-minded about things, but, he has a degree from Northeastern in mechanical engineering. He worked on a master's in thermodynamics. He's like, he tested jet engines at GE for years. He's a really smart man, but he is painfully honest. He does not, I think because he is on the spectrum, he's incapable really of lying, and he doesn't understand social cues. And so people kind of think that he's mean or like a nasty, and he's not. He's really he has one of the best hearts ever, and he cares about people, and he cares about this country, politically, and he's smart, and he worked really, really hard, and and he's a lot of fun, but he's also a little tough too, because he doesn't see the world the way you and I do. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes he will post something on social media, and I'll come running in like, you need to take that down, and he's, I'll be like, this is what it says to people that are reading it. And he's like, oh no, that's not what I meant. Like I meant this, and he's expecting like the viewer to like go like 10 steps, and I'm like, no, Al, like you got to believe me, like I'm not lying to you. You like, no one's going to get that. And he's like, well, you just don't have a good sense of humor, and so he sometimes thinks things are hilariously funny that no one else gets, and his social media is so insane, like, that I had to take him out of my feed, because he just posts like nonstop about the same things sometimes, and it, but, so I think there's a lot of misconceptions about Al, but he's a really good human being, and he's a really sweet person. And, he was definitely yin to my yang, like there's, I'm not, he'll sometimes say to me, like, you have everybody fooled, people think you're so nice. And he's like, but you're the ultimate bitch, and he's right, he's right. Cause I can go from 0 to psycho in about 2 seconds,
Well, let me ask you one last question. I was also a fan of a lot of Boston stuff. So I'm going to throw some names out there and you give me your thoughts on them and we'll try to wrap it up. So DYS.
DYS to me was always the little brother band to, SSD Control. So I love those guys. They were a lot of fun, and I'm still friends with Jonathan, and Jonathan has been really, really good to my school when I need something, because I work in a low income urban school district. And so, it's that whole, do it yourself work ethic. So if I need something, field trip, guest speaker, books, I have to fundraise for it. And Jonathan's always the first one to, write a check. So he's been, he's really
That's
great.
Really nice. The FUs.
Yeah, the FU's another like really fun band. I don't know those guys as well as I know, some of the other people, but like Steve Grimes, John Sox, it's just great people, really, and still persevering and playing, which I, give them credit for, but they were, Steve used to come and visit me when I first moved. Like that was one of the greatest things was when I first moved to Boston, I was so worried. I really only knew Al and a couple of people, but I lived in Fenway and, I can remember Steve used to always check in on me and come by and, see how I was doing and stuff. And so that was, that was really nice. They're great guys as well.
Yeah. Do you remember their ancient history when they, I think they upset the Maximum Rock and Roll people with their taking at face value My America record, and they couldn't really recognize sarcasm at all for whatever reason. They and the Maximum Rock and Roll people, some of which I knew, who are really nice, they totally took all that stuff completely seriously. Like the whole there was a thing the FUs had where they were posing as rednecks and they were shooting they were like punk rockers as cows on their cars. And it was a real big deal in the underground back then.
Yeah.
The underground's like 200 people. I always thought that was funny because they were like obviously a little smarter than, it's kind of reminiscent of things now on social media, actually. Where people not being able to recognize sarcasm, or there's no context is unimportant, nuance is unimportant.
Absolutely, and I think when SSD played San Francisco, we stayed at the Maximum Rock and Roll House, and with Tim, and I think that like, he was kind of expecting something a little different than like what he got with Al and the guys in SSD, who are all really awesome people and really smart and really nice and hardworking people, and so it was really fun to like listen in on those conversations during that, that week in August 1983.
Yeah. Okay, let me think. This band had, in my personal opinion, the second best Boston record after Get It Away, and that's Jerry's Kids, and there is This My World record.
Yeah, I mean, just an incredible, talented, incredibly talented band that could play really fast and really tight and really energetic, great band, probably, definitely in my upper echelons of bands that I love from Boston, great band.
Yeah. Well, thanks for answering my geeky Boston fanboy questions.
Yeah, you bet.